Sahana vavatu, Sahano bhunaktu, Sahaviryam karavavahe, Tejasvinavadhitamastu, Ma vidvishavahe. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. So verse 24 to 27, this is a revision for last week. It started by Arjuna asking Krishna to take him to the middle of the two armies so that he can receive a bird's eye view of what is about to happen, so that he can gather more information, so that he can potentially acquire some information that he may have missed remaining on one side. So he shows us that to make an informed decision, we need to change our vantage point, because it is very tempting to remain one-sided as long as we're on one side of the company or another side of the company or one side of the family or another side of the family. But the moment we move the vantage point from a different standpoint, then we gather new information and we're able to make a more informed decision. So Arjuna this much has done. And as he was placed amidst the two armies, he saw them, his family, on the other side, closer, face to face, because when you see the sensitive, the vulnerable, the fragile faces of your relatives, your entire disposition changes. It's no longer about they're over there, far away, and we're over here. You actually see the vulnerability of people who are about to all end their lives, and for a cause that could potentially have been avoided. So, in other words, Arjuna has a conscience. He feels empathy for others, not only himself, but also for those on the other side. And thereby, by recognizing the immensity of what is about to happen to the larger society at whole, he finally, he breaks down and he goes through emotional turmoil, and he recognizes there is a point of no return, because situations have taken place, and it's not like suddenly, some situation in your life pops up. It's actually a buildup of many smaller things. And thereby it comes to a point where you've lost trust, and the trust is beyond repair. And all throughout, the opportunities were there to rebuild that trust. But every single time I let it go, I let it go, I let it go. I was negligent. And because of that negligence, I let things sort of pass, and they pass little by little, until you realize it has gotten to a point where the relationship can no longer be repaired, because so much has happened, and both parties had a chance to intervene and change their approach, but neither party contributed. They were just expecting the other party to do something, but then the other party is equally expecting the other party to do something. So both remained really passive. No one was really engaged, try to take initiative to bring some level of communication and honesty and say, hey, things are not working out here. If we continue like this, then in 5 years from now or 1 year from now, your and our relationship, it's not going to work out. We're going to have to have a breakup. We're going to have to go our own ways, and that's going to be hurtful. Is there a way to repair this? So Arjuna has realized, which has contributed to his emotional turmoil, that owing to so many opportunities, he missed them all. And now it's a point of no return, and there's nothing that can be done. The breakup is finally there. And when the breakup comes, then the reality hits one. Until then, they've been just talking about it. Yeah, we should break up. We should go our own ways. We should go our own ways. Yeah, we should definitely go our own ways. But both of them are just really role-playing. They're not really in the real situation. So that real emotional pressure comes in those last few moments when it really, the reality just totally falls upon you. And your world is like, this is it. Trust is irreparable. its point of no return. And then all of the emotions in that moment, your true emotions that had been pushed down for so long, start to arise, start to surface. And therefore, this is exactly what Arjuna is now going through. So he then says, everyone here are my people. In other words, Arjuna's sense of my people is much larger than, let's say, Dhritarashtra, who only saw my people as people on his side, the Duryodhana's, sons and Kauravas. So Dhritarashtra could only see, oh, my people are in my family, my blood family. And this is typical how most interpret my people, or the purpose of my life. That is to protect my people, my family, and the neighbor. I don't need to worry about the neighbor. I don't need to worry about the country. I don't need to worry about the economy. I don't need to worry about the government. This is all their stuff. I just need to take care of my people. So this is a mind that thinks like that, but it also indicates that it is not very evolved, because the more your mind evolves, that sense of my, direct correlation, that sense of my starts to expand. Initially, as kids, what was my toys? If sister came over, she touched my car, she got a smack, and then she complained to mother. Same thing with a sister. My, whatever sisters play with, dolls, right? What do they play with nowadays? I don't know. So whatever sisters play with, right? It's my stuff. So as we mature, slowly, the sense of my starts to get larger and larger. But for most people, my stops. And where does my stop? My work, my blood relations, my husband, my wife, my children. That's about it. And we all know, intimately people like this. And so the greater degree to which your mind starts to appreciate that all that is here is Ishvara, there's only one intelligence manifesting in this entire world, including you right now, the listener, and this person, the talker. All that is here is one. The greater your mind starts to expand. Therefore, this is a direct indicator of your sense of true maturity. And therefore, Arjuna had that much to say that these are my people. He included the Kauravas, but also his own side, but also the larger society, which he didn't even know, as we will see in the following verses. And therefore, verse 28 to 31, realizing this extent, this degree, Arjuna breaks down. Seeing his relatives, he starts to tremble. And that's what the verses say. His skin starts to burn. His mind gets confused. His sweaty palms. He drops the bow. So these are all physiological conditions where we realize that I'm not capable of handling the situation. It's over my head. You know that situation? It's over your head. Yeah, that situation. So Arjuna was there. And it also indicates that the hero's journey is something that we would otherwise think opposite, because we think that the hero is cheerful and enthusiastic. But Arjuna had enough conscience to recognize the extent to what is about to happen. And therefore, he felt empathy for both sides, his side and the other side. Again, this is an indicator of maturity of your mind. If I only feel from my people, my mom, my dad, my children, my brother, my sister, my spouse, my girlfriend, my boyfriend, and they over there, and I stand up for my side only, that indicates a certain level of maturity of your mind. If I'm able to look at objectively both sides, that also shows a level of maturity of your mind. So in this case, Arjuna was able to look at both sides. He was not on either side. He was just looking at the extent of what is about to happen on both sides, because he knows that we are all interconnected. What happens on that side impacts you directly. If not immediately, impacts you later. This is a fact, because you live in a society that is interconnected. If I start to, for example, in a company, sort of, just lazy, be lazy there and, find a way to not do anything and, hide from the manager, then the whole company slowly, if you look at their profits in respect to your department that you're in, their profits start to go down, and that impacts everyone else. And then they have layovers, and then, you know, you're part of the layover, and then you have to leave. And then you say, you see, the companies is having layovers, and, you know, I can't do anything about it. But you too have contributed in the larger whole. In this way, Arjuna, the hero's journey, is such that he says, enough is enough. I've spent years denying and pushing things underneath as if everything's okay. I spent years putting up a fake spiritual smile as if everything's okay. I've spent so long pretending that things are okay. It's time to be radically honest with myself, says Arjuna, who is both a he and a she, not just a he. And so through radical honesty, he says, something needs to resolve here. Something's not right. I've had so many years, and yet I still feel like a powerless warrior or a warrioress. So something needs to change, and I want to look into it. So the first step towards one's hero's journey is owning up. Something needs to change. And how is that represented here? Through emotional turmoil, through emotional breaking down. Until then, the person has a facade like Duryodhana. Everything's okay. These people all love me. But none of this is really true. This is still living in one's personal bubble. Whereas Arjuna was able to confrontationally say unto himself, because it's very confronting to say to yourself, someone that is supposedly so composed, so mature, so kind of, worked out, to say to yourself, it seems like everything's worked out, but if I'm really honest, there are some things that in my life that are yet to be looked into, and I need to look into them, because if I don't look into them now, they will only manifest in very different ways, unpleasant ways in the future. And they will also manifest in reference to distorting the final knowledge. So when the final knowledge finally comes to you, when a teacher expounds the final knowledge, then the person's going to say, well, this is not making sense. I'm not relating to this. But they will relate to the mind stuff, but they will not relate to this, to the self-knowledge stuff. Common thing, right? So if I see, Vedanta has two sides. One of them is helping you, expand as a human being, as a relative human being. So we're talking about psychology, about emotional management, about having resilience, returning back after you fall, coming back. All of these things are very important. But then when it comes to self-knowledge, then there's a certain disconnect. And every teacher notices this. And it's a very interesting phenomenon. There's a certain disconnect, like this self-knowledge, I want to talk about the mind stuff, the more comfortable stuff, the human emotion side. But my question is, why? Because self-knowledge is talking about you. The irony is all of the stuff of the mind is talking about not you. And yet one feels comfortable about it. And when I talk about self-knowledge, which is talking about the real you, what do we say? Can you please return back to not me, the mind, the emotions? Very interesting phenomena. So therefore, why does this happen? Because the mind is still not completely primed to receive and want to hear every bit of self-knowledge. Every bit, wants to eat every single full stop, every comma, wants to eat it all up. It's so hungry for self-knowledge that it's like crazy. It's like, relax. No, I don't want to relax. That's my kind of student. Really. So hungry. Can't get over it. Yes, because this person has a mind that is primed, that is ready. And I honor self-help. I honor personal development. Nice dog, Lorena. Where did you get the dog? I didn't know you had one. I think you kind of showed us, right? It came over to you. Okay. So therefore, we have to have a mind that's ready enough to have, an insatiable appetite for the final knowledge, which will be coming up very soon. Okay. And therefore, in verse 32, based on all of this conclusion of Arjuna, he makes a final statement and he says, there's no desire for victory here, because what is the point of winning if I'm going to lose my kinsmen, my teachers, my uncles, my brothers, my grandsire? What's the point of enjoying a kingdom without those with whom I want to share my victory with? And therefore, he then says in verse 35, which is now going to commence, he says, also walking away is not an option. And he gives a reason why.
So, Andre, to sum up, once we have a problem, we have to admit it, to be honest with ourselves and to say, yes, this is the problem. Let's face it. This is something which you have to look into it, to admit it.
Yeah, first step is to acknowledge it and to
acknowledge it. Yeah, thank you.
And not just to kind of acknowledge it and say, well, you know, I have a problem, but in a sense that, you know, to acknowledge it, but also to have that motivation to look for the solution. And to, if you don't know the solution, then we can pray. We can ask someone. We can, you know, go online and look for some solutions. So one has to have that desire, that fire of motivation to want to resolve it. Like someone just asked me recently, they have some negative thoughts going on. And, you know, negative thoughts, I don't really call it negative. I just call it a distortion of thinking, which is producing an unpleasant thought.
Yes.
So someone had this quote negative, and I said to him that instead of just letting this thought pass by, because there's this tendency to sort of, he's told me, you know, he's been looking at these thoughts for years, just look at these negative thoughts, and he was in different kinds of Buddhism, Dzogchen, Zen, and so a lot of them have this practice of mindfulness where you look at your so-called negative thoughts or your distortions, and you just let them pass by. And I said, you know, it has its place, no doubt, it has its place, but you have to also graduate from this process. Because if you just let thoughts pass by, for how long are you going to let thoughts pass by? For your whole life. So in other words, I'm looking for my entire life, just negative thoughts which are bothering me passing by. So in other words,
what you're saying is just to understand the cause of that negative thoughts.
Understand the underlying cause, which is producing this kind of a sensation. Because when he says negative, what he really implies, it is causing me discomfort. So what is it? Why is a thought causing you discomfort? Well, if I put that question aside and I ask you, what kind of a thought does not cause discomfort? One that is keeping with what is to be done. One that is keeping with the reality. One that is keeping with the harmony of the state of affairs. One that is in line with the grand scheme of things. One that is, in general, in harmony with yourself and the world. So whenever a thought is opposite to all of that I just said, that's called a thought that is in disharmony. And a thought that is, in other words, not in harmony, that kind of thought makes you feel uncomfortable. So if I just let these kinds of thoughts, which make me uncomfortable, pass by for years and years, what I'm really just looking at is an effect of something that is much deeper and underlining, which is the cause. So what I said to him is that rather than just watching those thoughts, change your approach. Because if I just keep on looking at these thoughts, nothing's going to happen. I'm going to get more negative thoughts. Now I looked at him, what could I be thinking in such a way that is making this thought unpleasant? How would I have to look at this thought in a way that when it does come to me, it's producing this discomfort in myself? How else could I look at this, or what have I missed about this thought that is not letting me have any peace until I look deeper into it? What is this thought trying to show me? What lessons am I yet to extract out of this thought? And when I do extract them and looking into them, I will finally look at the cause and thereby immediately relieving this passing thought, which I call negative. What is this thought trying to show me? How else can I look at this thought? See, so I asked him to question the thought rather than to just look at the thought and sort of and hope it goes away. Another thing you can do is you can pray. I don't know what to do, Ishwara, but please help me to release this thought because, you know, it's just, I want to live as a happy person. I want to do my part in this world, and I need some help to release me from this troubling thoughts. So these are some things that you can initiate through your own self-effort. So notice what I'm showing you here, taking responsibility. Rather than going and saying, hey, you help me. Partner, just show up and make me feel good. That works as long as your partner is right next to you. The moment they leave, all of your stuff comes right back. For example, at work, you know, I remember my parents, right? My parents, they're at work and they come back and they're complaining. Da, 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 da. This is how work is, and people are bothering me. But the moment they come together, that voice silences instantly. It's amazing to watch. And I wonder, why is that? Well, because as long as two people are together, they feel like everything is okay. But the moment they're away, it seems like things are not okay. And the tendency is then to blame the work. See, the people over there are not nice. Only my partner is nice. That's why I have no problems. But it's got nothing to do with your partner. It's that you have a certain anchor with your partner, with whoever it is that you love. Doesn't have to be a partner or your child. You have a certain anchor, and that anchor causes you to feel a sense of completion because they give you all of those needs that enrich your life. Now, when someone gives you needs that enriches your life, there's just no space for all of these things to be brought out. They're just temporarily subsided. The moment they leave, it all comes out. And then I say, yeah, it's coming out because of society. It's not the society. It's not the work. It's not anyone. It is you. Therefore, the Course puts a lot of stress on taking self-responsibility, taking responsibility for your thoughts, for your feelings, for your opinions about yourself, opinions about over there, opinions about them, opinions about politicians, opinions about countries, opinions about races, opinions about teachings, opinions about those who are close to you, especially opinions about those who are close to you, because it's very easy to have composure about people who you don't know. We're all experts. We're all enlightened in that sense. Hey, I've got no issues. I can just let people pass by. I love everyone. Now suppose I bring us all inside one room and we cannot go anywhere, and we all have to spend a lot of time there and get to know each other. And that's when all of this stuff starts to come out. Suddenly all of our enlightenment is gone like that. In other words, all that stuff was just there, and I was carrying Duryodhana's mask, which made me kind of, feel like everything's okay, but there's things to work on. Therefore, in this sense, we need to look at our inner stuff, which is what the Course will address. Verse 35. Eta nahantum ichchami gnatopi madhusudana apitrailo kyarajyasya hetoh kim numahi krite. So Arjuna says here that even if I walk out of this situation, suppose I just walk out, even then I will not fight, because even if I walk out, then Duryodhana will come after me, because he knows that I am a future threat, but I'm also a current threat. Either way, I, Arjuna, am a threat to Duryodhana. And so by walking out, I will still not fight, because what is the point of fighting and killing all of these men when I will be without my loved ones? And so Arjuna says that basically three things are possible in this situation. The first is that I can win the kingdom. That means I can fight and I can regain Hastinapur back. And right, I will be the king. I will enjoy all of the comforts that the kingdom provides. I can let myself be killed by Duryodhana because he perceives me as a threat. Even if I do walk out and I say I choose not to fight, he will go after me because he knows that I can change my mind later on and continue to fight. Or I will, says Arjuna, gain kingship of heaven and earth. So look at this. Arjuna is a tough client. Suppose you're trying to get your client to take action, and your client says, I will not take action. Even if I win the kingdom, I still don't want to take action. Even if I let myself be killed, I still don't want to take action. Even if the reward is gaining heaven, I still don't want to take action. How would you deal with this client? This is a very tough client, I tell you. Krishna's got hard work to do here. He needs to really, step in, as he will, and we will see. So what it's showing you is that Arjuna is in such a state that no matter what you offer him, no matter what advantages you present to him, no matter what benefits you present to him, like, you will go to heaven, man. You will have a whole kingdom to yourself. Still, Arjuna says, I will not fight. Now, in the next verse, he says why he doesn't want to fight. Yes, Paul?
Yeah, I mean, if you look at the probably the USP of Bhagavad Gita, the USP, the uniqueness of Bhagavad Gita, according to me, is the as you mentioned just now, the tough position of Krishna to deal with people who are continuously, consciously and innocently protecting and siding with the right, and on the other side, people who are continuously on the wrong side and yet not willing to admit it. So I think Gita is a journey in preparing your sophistication as early as possible in life. So that, and again, it's a journey how to face death as an inevitability.
Yeah.
Which is actually a problem that everybody asks God. How can I face death?
Yeah,
How can I tackle this problem of life and death? How do I face it? What will be my position on the, let's say, day of judgment?
Yeah.
So
And also,
am I right?
yeah, and also I want to add that, see, there is this thing especially in India, where you only start to pursue and make the right course of decisions and start to reevaluate and reassess your life when you go into, quote, vanaprastha stage, which is basically 60 onwards. But by then, you've already so deeply ingrained yourself in your existing notions that it's very hard to make a change. So what Bao is saying is start as early as possible. There is no, let me first live out my life. Let me first take care of my children. Let me first let my kids finish high school or get out of home, and then I will begin this. Life is not linear. It's not linear. It doesn't work like that, because by the time they move out of your house, or you get a new home where you can study finally in peace, a new set of circumstances show up, which then again you have to look into and address. So life is not about, let me first do this and then I will do this. Rather, what is presented to me right now, the truth is always available to me right now. If the truth is always available to me right now, then where's the question of putting it aside when the truth is the only thing that is for my own well-good, for my own well-being? So there's no question of putting it aside, because the truth is for your own well-being right now, which is what is going to make you a much stronger person in the future when you actually wanted to start 5 years from now. So suppose you say, no, I'll start 5 years from now, and you finally start 5 years from now. If you started right now, 5 years from now, you would have been so much more alert, so much more decisive, so much more clear. And ironically, whatever you're doing 5 years from now is going to have much better quality of actions and decisions than if you didn't start.
When you say start, what do you mean? What start are you start of what are you referring to?
I'm referring to, for example, right now, we are in the process of starting to discuss about life, starting to discuss about decisions, about what is the right course of action, what can potentially, sidetrack us. So starting in terms of your journey to look inwards about what is it that makes me, what makes me go around, what makes me make these sorts of decisions that compromise my own happiness. And why am I making these decisions? So in other words, starting is taking that final step, not final, but that first step of looking inwards. No longer about, hey, let's help Arjuna. Let's help Draupadi. We're not talking about other people here. We're talking about you. In fact, I just saw a lecture. There's so many lectures on YouTube about discussing Arjuna, discussing Draupadi. And I'm, okay, this has a place, but how is this going to transform my life? So when we start, we take this shift of looking at your own self, looking at your own stuff rather than the world. The world is responsible for my stuff. And this is a massive transformation in one's maturity. So in that sense, we are starting. In fact, we're not really ever starting. We've always been on the journey since beginningless time. So, and therefore in one life or the other, you come to a point where the strength that captures you, it captures you so much that you spend a lot of time now, serious, dedicated time on yourself. So it's not like we started for the first time ever. We never began. We were always there, and here we are now. I will often say Arjuna or Arjuna, Duryodhana or Duryodhana. It's actually A at the end, because Hindi takes away the akara at the end. That's why they say Arjuna. So they cut off that A at the end. Now remember, this is Sanskrit. Sanskrit doesn't cut off the akara. It always completes with an A. So it's actually Arjuna, Duryodhana, Yoga. But Hindi, you will say Yoga, Arjun, Dhrtarash, right? Things like that. So, but you also hear me interchange. That is because I kind of like cutting off the A at the end. So that's just my thing.
The translation of the verse, and it was saying something about, even for the sake of ruling over the three worlds, I'm thinking that's something to do with heaven.
Exactly. So that's what I said. There's three options. One of them is to, conquer the kingdom, get the kingdom for oneself. The second option is to be killed. In that case, it's still one fight. And the third option is, suppose he does what is to be done, that is to fight, and somehow he ends up in heaven. Suppose. Even then, that's the three worlds. So three worlds refers to heaven. So even then, he doesn't want to fight, because who's going to be in heaven? Arjuna. So he's going to be carrying those memories of having killed his kinsmen, his loved ones. So for that reason, he doesn't even want to go to heaven, because Arjuna will be there in heaven. All right, so verse 36, Arjuna wants to say why he doesn't want to fight. So let's see, verse 36. Nihatya dhartarashtranaha ka pritiksya janardana papam eva shraye dasman hatvaitan atatayinaha. So Arjuna introduces a word in verse 36, which is papam. Now, papam is it's a common word in the Vedic culture, and I'll just explain using a whiteboard. So any action that you do, that you and I do, has two kinds of consequences. It has an immediate and a delayed consequence. Okay, and action can have two kinds of qualities to them. The first we could say is informed action. And things like your and others' well-being is considered. Okay. You account the whole when you make a decision. So you account the consequences, both short and long term. You have an integrated personality. This means what you say, what you do, and what you think, they're all congruent. That means you generally have an honesty about your disposition. And here we have another type of action, which we could say is negligent. And negligent action is, suppose, okay, you tell me, what's a negligent action? What's the quality of a negligent action?
Hatred. Not following what you said, or not
following
or
what,
not
good
complying with whatever you said you will do.
Not following up, right? Not following up. Impulsive action. What else is negligent?
Hatred.
Hatred?
Yeah.
Okay, so yeah. So in other words, I would just say unfair treatment or perception of another.
Being selfish.
Yeah, selfish. In other words, not considering others' well-being, only yours mainly, more or less. Okay. Primitive mind, yeah, so we'll say impulsive. That's a primitive mind. Violence, in other words, lack of consideration for others' right to exist in harmony with nature, aka violence. Lack of empathy. Okay, so that's enough. All right, so these are the two kinds of actions. Now, in one word, you can say this is dharmic action, and this is adharmic action. Okay. Now, this action can have two kinds of consequences. It can have an immediate consequence, and we'll call this so immediate. And in Sanskrit, we call this drishta palam. Drishta means seen. That means it's immediately experienced, it's immediately seen to you. So someone, for example, gives you a handshake or smiles at you because you smiled back. In other words, it's immediate. And here we have a delayed. This is called adrishta palam. Adrishta means unseen, and palam means result. So unseen result. It doesn't mean it's not going to come. It just means it's going to, suppose, come in, say, 1 month, or 1 year, okay, or next lifetime, like that, next lifetime. And this immediate can have, based on the kind of action that you did, right, it can have what we call, and delay can have two kinds also, depends on what kind of action you did. So if your action was keeping with dharma, then the immediate will be what we call punya. If your action was keeping with adharma, that means it was distorted. For example, lack of considering others' well-being, then we call that papam. So we have immediate punyam, immediate papam. Papam will just say uncomfortable result. And punyam will say is comfortable. And the same thing goes here. We got punyam and we got papam. Okay. So this means that, right, if I receive something today and I cannot trace why have I received it, it's because it's a delayed. That means it happened a long time ago. My action happened a long time ago, and I'm unable to connect my action to my result. But just because I'm unable to doesn't mean that it's not there. So this is the basis of what we call immediate and delayed. Immediate is drishtam palam, delayed is adrishta palam, and they can be punyam or they can be papam. It's the same thing with punyam. There was a story, it's a true story, where one of the ladies, she was taking an older lady who was traveling to work by walking, and one of the ladies saw this older woman traveling because they lived in the same building, and she offered her a ride every single day for about a year. And this old lady said, "You don't have to, it's okay, it's a short distance." But the other lady, the younger woman, said, "No, it's okay, just come into my car, I will take you, I will take extra turns, and I will, help you arrive to your workplace." And just went for about a year. Now, that same young lady that was giving the ride, one day she dropped by at an airport and she had to get a taxi to her hotel. And no taxi wanted to accept her because the hotel was so close that you could not get any money of this person. No one wants to drive you, they want to make money of you. So, and she thought, oh, what to do, and it's raining and there's no one to help me. It's kind of a weird situation. You can pay anyone, but no one wants to help you. And a taxi man just comes over to her, random, says, "You seem to be having some, stress. Can I help you?" And she says, "Yes, no taxi man wants to take me. My hotel is so close. And the taxi man says, it's okay, get into my taxi and I will help you get over there. And that's exactly what the taxi man did. And she says, oh, thank you, you're so kind, you know, I want to pay you money. She says, and he said, no, this is, you know, I'm helping you here. So look at this. She got a free ride by the taxi man. You say, how? Because it doesn't happen to all people. You could have two people standing. One of them is going to get a taxi ride. Another man or another woman is not going to get a taxi ride. So this is an example to show you how there's a trace. There's a cause effect. This is what she's receiving now. This is her punyam. There's another example where one of the friends asked for money for education, and a man, I think it was a woman, doesn't matter, said, here, I will gladly help you and pay for your education in your tuition fees. And this fellow was very grateful. And he says, I'll pay you back. And this fella said, no, you don't have to pay me back. This is, you know, I'm helping you out to your education. A year later, or whatever it was, that fella who helped with the tuition fees was at an airport. And suddenly their credit card was not working. And they needed to get a flight, right, desperately. In fact, I think they needed to pay extra fees for their bag. And their credit card was not working, which is the last thing that you want, your credit card not to be working. The only credit card you got on an airport, right? And you got valuable stuff. And he started to panic. Oh no, you know, can't you help me? Can't you do anything else? Don't you have an ATM at the airport? No, we can't help you. You have to go and get money. And someone else on the next counter noticed, right, them stressed out. Noticed this fellow stressed out. He just walked over and he says, you know, I'll give you the money. How much do you need? 200. He just takes the money, puts it on the counter and walks away. Just like that, walks away. Wow, that's amazing. This is punyam. Punyam for helping this other person. Suppose, right? We cannot trace exactly, but just an example for helping someone else in the past. So this is how this punyam papam works. There's a cause-effect relationship. And this is how the setup is made in such that you cannot do something where the action goes wasted. Every action in this universe counts. That is how the setup works. Everything, the smallest thing that you do counts. And this is where you gain trust in this order, Ishwara's order, that everything I do, even if it's 5 minutes worth of effort to put into my own journey, as we said, to begin my journey, that counts somehow, some way that you will never be able to trace. Because most people are so busy in their life, we cannot even remember what we did 2 weeks ago, let alone 2 years ago, let alone 20 years ago. But if you could, suppose you could see all of the intricate networks of how you've contributed over here, and another person has, you know, contributed to you, and then you contributed over here, did something small, all of that would suddenly make sense. But just because you can't see it, don't think it's not there. This is how the order is set up. This is how the Vedas explains why you can have two people. One of them is struggling. One of them is just, you know, having a smooth ride. It's not that one is, quote, lucky, and they're just randomly assigned all of this luck. It's that there are unseen causes, adrashtapalam, whether it's papam or punyam, which is making you live the life that you are having right now. Is this making sense? Yeah. I think we all have examples where you just had something unexpected, either pleasant or unpleasant happen to you. And you say then, wow, you know, why am I so unlucky? Why is God punishing me? God is not punishing you. Understand this. This is a notion that has to go right now. God was never rewarding you nor punishing you. It's a completely impersonal system that simply offers cause-effect relationship. It's a system which is provided, a network of resources, the soil, the trees, the air, the sun. All of these things are provided for you to live your life out. And by your own free will, you do an action which is either informed or negligent, and the consequences of that show up somewhere, somehow in this life or the next. That's how the setup is. And you will see this the more we understand this intricate network of Ishvara as we go down the course. But it helps you a lot to understand this, I know, Bao, because it helps you to see it's a completely fair system. It's a completely fair system. It's an infallible system that never fails. No one gets cancer just because they got cancer. There's a reason for it. Genetics, health, lifestyle, many causes for it. Exposure to the sun, I don't know, but there's some cause to it. Everything happens because it's connected to something else. In this, you can have trust. Yes, Paul.
Yeah, I think it also means someone has to accept by experience or by instruction from a guru or a teacher, such as yourself, early in life, that there is a recording system in nature that always surrounds you wherever you do, even if you're alone in a place where you expect no one is watching, there is a recording system. If that is understood, I think the question of cause and effect can be a little bit easier to understand. Am I right?
And this recording system, it's a nice word. So you are all kind of, everyone's actions are, recorded. So no action, as I said, goes wasted in this universe. And this can be a good thing if you have the right attitude about it. How can it be a good thing? It means that sometimes we feel like no matter what we do, there's no results, there's nothing's happening. Why is nothing happening? Even though it's recorded, there is a delay. And that delay may not be keeping with your patience. My patience could be maybe 1 year, but the way the delay works usually gives you back things in 20 years. 20 years, it's wonderful. 10 years. How many of you can relate to this? You started something 10 years ago, and only now you started to see the fruits of your labor. I certainly have. 10 years on average. For me, personally, it takes about 10 years to have a proper, tangible, palpable result that I can just flourish in and say, wow, thank God. Finally, I'm receiving a little bit of what I was hoping for. 10 years. Forget about 1 year. 1 year is like that. 2023 is like yesterday. That's how the system works. And therefore, we need a certain maturity to be patient. Therefore, it's not just now, hey, get on with it. Give me a pill. Let me swallow the pill and, it's going to all work. 10 years. That's why these courses go on for so long, because you have been conditioned for lifetimes to think in a certain way. And now comes Krishna's teaching that reorients and resculpts you completely so you can see the reality. And that takes some time because you got a lifetime of conditioning to get through. That's why it takes a long time.
Andre?
Yes?
How do we reflect or perceive a massive papam that happens in a war, like current times when all the wars that are happening in Hamas and Israeli and all over the world, like Ukraine and all.
Right.
How do you perceive that massive papam that goes on this one side of the human race? It's very hard for me to look at the individual papam and punyam. That is easy, but when I look at the massive thing that happens, especially children involved in horrific deaths and things like that,
Yeah.
how do you perceive that?
Sure. It's a question that has many components to it. Certainly, if you want to simplify this big question, because now Rani is asking to connect the country, which is what we call the total karma of the race, the individual, and all of the circumstances that have taken place before that have led to this. So first of all, a war is not a sudden thing. It is a coming together of many smaller conflicts that have taken place and have arose to a point where the pressure, unresolved pressure, is so high. That means the individuals themselves haven't looked into their own life. And then the collective hasn't looked into their own life. And they're together, they come, as I said last week, the mob mentality. and then they do something like suddenly, a mass assassination. So as we will see very soon, Arjuna is going to bring this very question, Rani. He's going to say, when an individual gets corrupted, when an individual's sense of righteousness is compromised, that individual makes the family. The family makes the suburb. The suburb makes the community. The community makes the nation. You see this? It all starts from the small. The small expands outwards. So the kind of culture you have in a country affects everyone on a national level. But also every individual individually has a choice to look at that mass influence of the culture and find further flaws and choose to go against that pull of what is not keeping with harmony. So the individual also has a responsibility to align themselves with what is right, despite the pull of the culture. Now, the number of individuals who do that and number of individuals who don't do that, there's always a, like this. It's like this. Now, sometimes one side who hasn't looked into themselves is much higher than the other side, which is usually the case. So it seems like adharma is getting the upper hand. That's what it seems like. But there's always the minority who have looked into themselves, who you often don't hear about, but they're there for sure. And they also happen to be in the crossroad, in the line of fire, which the majority who are not keeping with harmony have contributed. So now you say, wow, both of them are in the same nation. So this sameness is what we call the national collective karma, the national collective shared consequences of papam and punyam. This is why some people are born in a war-torn country, and some are born in a very smooth country. That is because they also share a collective punya papa with their own country. So I want you to take one thing out of this. It's a very complex network that you and I can never understand. We can only postulate parts of it, but to understand the many years of buildup that has made the wars happen like today between, as you say, in the Middle East, a lot of variables have contributed to that, and that will keep on going. The wars today that are happening will have a huge influence on future generations. And those future generations will take the toll of what's happening right now. And someone in the future will be asking the same question that you're asking right now. They will be saying, why do we have this? Why do we have these individuals sort of, suddenly, doing these mass group assassinations? Why? Well, we are in it right now. We're seeing it right now. The pressure of unresolved stuff comes out in the present. And that same pressure will come out in the future. Until the individual looks at themselves, until the society looks at themselves, until they all collectively agree, that's called culture. Until then, you will have this kind of disharmony in the society. And it's very hard, I tell you, to make the whole society comply, even if it's righteous. It's not easy being in the government position, not easy at all. Because you think, oh, now I'm in the government position, I can now influence the whole collective society. But the moment you put out some new bill to sign, you will find how much resistance you have. And then you will really see how complex politics are. Because we think politics is always about this side or that side. Even if you are completely straight, like Krishna, clear, and you try to make a decision in the name of the well-being of the society, guess what happens? You will find so much resistance, and you will find so much unexpected consequences that you can't even fathom. For example, just to make it more concrete, in the 1960s, what happened was in New York, we had basically slums, and they wanted to clean up these slums. It's also happening in Delhi. And what happened was they started to take away these slums out to give people a better chance for more stable, more higher-rise buildings. Sounds like a fair thing, right? I'm going to give you a better house, a more modern society. Do you know what happened? because these slums were providing a sense of community to the environment, they were allowed to see each other, they're allowed to play, they're allowed to share the common bond. What happened now? The slums were taken away. They were given modern society, modern infrastructure. The moment that happened, a year later, crime skyrocketed. Why? Because now people were separated. The sense of community disappeared. The sense of what keeps us bonded, sense of checking up on each other, all of that was removed in the name of doing something good for the society. The government did do something good for the society. It's not like the government injured them. But can you see how one thing affects another thing? You never think of it like this. But this is what happened. Crime skyrocketed. Suddenly people started to use drugs, started to do all of these things that were not there prevalent at all while the slums were there. The society is very complex, especially when you have all of these different personalities coming together and you try to make that work. So now you think of wars. It's the same thing. You try to fix one thing, but then another group doesn't agree, and so they plot something in the future, which then will just continue this whole thread of conflict. Therefore, ultimately, the most thing you can do, in fact, you need to know, what can I control and what can I not control? What is out of my control and what is in my control? Some of us read politics for 20 years. I know someone intimate to myself, my dad, reads politics, 20 years. Hey, Dad, what's happening in politics? Oh, people are fighting. That's it, 20 years, that's your summary, people are fighting? I don't have to read 20 years of politics to know that. I can just read one single sentence and yet not doing anything about it. Why don't you go there and, have your voice heard? No, it's too much. You don't understand. This is too complex. Not doing anything, just reading, not doing anything. Most people are like this, throwing protests left and right, but they don't understand the complexity of this human society. And even if they did have some say, you would be shocked the amount of resistance that you would find. And you have to be strong. So I honor anyone in government. I honor them who are there, because they have to be very professional and be objective towards people's complexities.
When we die, will we get more of an experiential understanding of this system before the next reincarnation? Is that how it works? Because it's like a veil of forgetfulness, which means even if we've been through some deeper understandings in our previous existence, we've forgotten. And it seems that, you're sort of born a baby and then you have to suffer or find the wisdom. Like, what happens if we die tomorrow? What happens to this knowledge that we've gained? And
yeah,
I know that's a massive question, probably.
Ravi, so you are a product of what you just said. So in other words, you already had a body, and the life that you're experiencing now, which has gotten you to this experience now, to be in the Gita, in this course, to talk about this, is a consequence of all of the many steps that you have taken in the past. So in that same way, you could ask the person that you will be in the next life, could ask the exact same question, and the Andre in the next life will answer in the exact same way. And what would the Andre in the next life say? Well, Mr. What will your name be in the next life? Suppose Pinocchio. Okay, Pinocchio. So, remember the previous life? And then Pinocchio is going to say, no, I don't. And then Andre is going to say, well, in whatever my name will be next life, right? Andre is going to say, well, in the previous life, you had a conversation with Andre in that life. You got yourself to a point of looking into your inner self. You're looking at your, your own stuff, learning. And because of all of that stuff, you have gotten and you found a teacher in that life. So that is happening exactly right now.
Shloka 40 from chapter 2, I think.
Okay, so
Swalpamasya.
Okay, so we will talk about that, right? 14, chapter, verse 14, chapter 2. Okay.
40, I think, chapter 2.
Okay, cool. We will get there. Cool.
Yeah.
We will talk
I think talks about the same point. I just remembered that.
No problem. So that means we will cover that. Okay, so is this kind of answering the question, Ravi?
Yeah, it is. And it's the implication then that we've all possibly or definitely met before in some incarnation.
No, that's not necessarily true. It can be true because, as I said, the network is so complex that you just cannot definitively say whether the jiva has met another, whether I've been married to you or my wife before, and this is one more life we're meeting, whether my dad is a dog right now that I have, right? It's things like that. So we cannot definitively say, because you have no evidence, you have no proof, but we can infer. As much as you can infer is the kind of person that you are now. Suppose you are born with a certain kind of thinking, analytical thinking. What can you infer by that about the previous person? Suppose right now in this life, you're thoughtful. You think details, you have analysis, you tend to have detailed thinking, and you're just born like that. And suppose your brother is not like that. They're more generalized. They don't say, why? They say, Ravi, why do you think so much? Just relax. But Ravi is a very deep thinker. What does that imply about Ravi previously?
That you had some, you had an inquisitive mind previously, or you've kind of, you're going up the ladder of inquisition to explore your thoughts.
Simple. In other words, you develop this capacity to some level, to some degree previously, and this capacity simply passes on. So this is the answer. In other words, it's not like you're randomly given this mind, which is, whatever your mind is right now. You were given this mind for a reason, and there's always this cause-effect relationship, as Ravi just said. So this is what I want to point out. Otherwise, let's move on because, karma is a big topic, and this will be mentioned dozens of times throughout the course. So Arjuna says, if I destroy all of these people, I will get papam. Therefore, because so much destruction has been caused, and this will lead to my future suffering. So Arjuna is worried about his well-being. Okay. And he says, therefore, the next verse will say, so he says, since both my seen and unseen consequences will be unfavorable unto myself, for that reason, why should I fight? So verse 37. Tasma narha vayam hantum dhartarashtran swabandhavan swajanam hikatam hatva sukhinah syama madhava. So Arjuna says here, knowing that my actions will cause great destruction to these fellow men, for that reason alone, I do not see any future happiness unto myself, because there will be so much papam onto myself. So in other words, look at this. Why doesn't Arjuna want to fight? Is it because he's being kind to his kin? Or is it because he doesn't want to incur papam onto himself and therefore suffer in the future? Is he being kind? Is that why he doesn't want to fight? No, it's the other one. In other words, you don't do things. If you think you're being kind to do something, you need to relook at your thing. In other words, either you think I'm being kind for you, I'm doing you a favor, or you say I'm doing you a favor because it pleases me to give you a favor. I'm doing you a favor because it makes me feel like a more mature, giving human being. It makes me a more kind of evolved human being to know that I have the ability to give you. In other words, if you think that you're doing something for somebody while you don't want to do it yourself, that means you're doing the right thing. But inside you, there's resistance and you don't want to do it, that's going to lead to your resentment almost every single time. There was one time, many times actually, when I was younger, I didn't have this knowledge. So naturally, my family in Serbia would ask me, can we, borrow some money? Because they were living in those conditions. And here we are in Australia. And there was one time where my cousin asked me, can you send me $2,000? Just like that, $2,000. Because we just visited our family, and now we came back to Australia and everyone's asking us for money because they see, Australians like, oh, they're rich and all these things. And I remember there was this thing in me that I didn't want to give $2,000 because I was very young and still working. And so somehow my cousin convinced me, no, I need $2,000. You know, we're not rich here. And I gave it. But I remember feeling so much resentment for doing that. I did the right thing, didn't I? I gave the money. I helped them out. But in me, I felt so much resentment right here in the heart. I never talked to my cousin again. Whose error is it? Is it her or is it my error? My error. In other words, I thought I was doing the right thing, and I did, but I did it for the wrong reasons. The least I could have done, or one could have done, is said, you know, I don't want to give you so much money because it doesn't make me feel comfortable. But then you ask yourself, can I choose not to give? Because then I will feel guilty. So what do you have to do? You have to negotiate. You say, how much could I give that makes me feel okay with it, makes me feel happy, and at the same time, I have done what she's asking. I could have done that easy. Okay, I'll give you $100. That makes me feel fantastic, and no problems there. Therefore, we have to look at our motivations. Where is it coming from? If you think you are doing something for another person, you're doing the right thing, but for the wrong reasons, there will be some conflict. There will be some resistance. For example, the scriptures tell me you should follow Dharma. What's the mind going to say? Why? What's in it for me? Children are the same thing. Why? Why should I follow the Gita? Why should I read the Gita? Because you're telling them to do the right thing, but they're doing it for the wrong reasons. And what they're going to do is develop resentment towards the entire Bhagavad Gita. By the time it comes into their life, they're going to say, no, this stuff is a turnoff. So many parents want their children, force their children to come to the Bhagavad Gita. I know, so many. And these children then develop so much resentment in later life because their parents imposed the Gita when the children couldn't see the personal value for themselves. Or I do the right thing for the right reasons. In other words, rather than following the scriptures, I recognize what the scriptures are showing me, that if I go against Dharma, that means if I'm negligent, then who pays the price? I pay the price. You pay the price. In other words, now I have switched shift. I've made a shift. I'm doing the right thing, following Dharma for the right reasons. What's the right reasons? Understanding that what this is trying to show me is that if I keep on going through a negligent path in life, it seems like I'm getting away with it. But in the long run, in the future, who's going to be there in the future? Who's going to pay the consequences? You will be there. So your body right now will be in that body in the future who's going to be suffering because of the kind of actions that you're doing right now. Therefore, Arjuna doesn't have fake empathy. Arjuna is concerned about the future Arjuna. The future Arjuna who has killed so many people right now and has gained so much papam, all of those consequences will be in the future Arjuna. So Arjuna right now in the present may say, oh, I am relaxed, there's no problems, but time is going forward. Time doesn't go back. And because time is going forward, eventually this person is going to be in that person in the future, and that person in the future is going to suffer. Therefore, who's going to suffer? This person is going to suffer. So Arjuna is not having this faith compassion, oh, I'm trying to be kind, a good person. The scriptures say don't kill. Arjuna is honest to himself. That's why I said he's got conscience. He says, this is going to cost me peace. This is going to cost me a lifetime of suffering, and I don't want that for myself. So this is the first thing to understand. You never do things for somebody else's sake. Even if you do things for somebody else's sake, it's because it pleases you to do things for somebody else's sake. The moment you understand this, you're actually empowered. And I'm not talking about being selfish. This is just a common universal experience if you are brutally honest to yourself, brutally honest. You will recognize that everything you ever do in life, the people you hang out with, the conversations you have, the foods you eat, the times you go to sleep, the people you love to talk to, the teachers you listen to, everything is because it pleases you, it enriches your life. You treasure something in the presence that that other person gives you. Yes, iPhone, Anshal.
Hi, Andre. I've got a question. So my question is that, for example, if there's someone we haven't had the best of the relationship, and you think in your mind that maybe because of the previous, not karma, but maybe you could call it karma, previous course of the relationship, however that's been, you start thinking, no, we got to be positive, and you got to be maybe praise the person or give them positive feedback about something they're doing. But the underline is that there are still sort of feelings inside of you, which you still have some resentment, and you still have some sort of, it doesn't align with your what you feel like, truly feel inside, but you want to make the relationship better.
Right.
So my question is that in this sort of a situation where your mind and your heart sometimes is not in one place,
right,
you want to make the relationship better,
right,
by doing something which is maybe, for example, talking something positive to the person or praising someone,
yeah,
to be able to make the relationship better.
right,
Is
right.
that the better way to go, or you stick to what you feel? But also sometimes I think sometimes what you feel is it comes from one sort of perspective. My question, I think my situation is a little bit more sort of complex, but can you understand this?
Yeah, I do.
Okay.
So see, it's just like with, I mean, you're speaking directly what Yudhishthira and the Pandavas have experienced, which is, they were in a situation and they were praising Duryodhana. They were doing the best they could to reconnect and negotiate and make things sort of, not rock the boat. But in their process of not rocking the boat, what have they actually done in the long term vision? They've only made things more rocky. They've only added more rocks along the path. So by thinking that I'm sort of doing something to, not rock the boat, I don't want to disturb things because I am invested in the relationship's health. Naturally, you're invested in the well-being of the relationship. And so there's a tendency to notice few things, and we all notice things. And there's a natural tendency to not mention anything. And then you have to ask yourself, why am I not mentioning this, even though I feel it in my body? Because my body is a wonderful indicator of the tension that is unresolved between me and this other person. Your body is the ultimate indicator of that tension. So the indicator is there, and yet there's no integration. What I feel is not what I say. What I feel is one thing, but what I say is something else. So this means even myself now, I am out of alignment with myself. And that very out of alignment is going to cause disturbance with the relationship between us. Because the undercurrent is such that in a communication, there's always two things that come out. One is the actual words that you hear. But then the second thing that we don't hear, but we hear intuitively, this is the human capacity, is the undercurrent, the undertone behind the words. And this undertone keeps on building every time we speak or give them positive praise, but we don't really mean it. What we really mean is something else. So you have to assess your own voice, your own motivations. Where is this need to praise them? Where is it coming from? Is it coming from a fear of losing them? Is it coming from a sense of hope of wanting to restore things because I believe in deep down that this is actually not going to really be healthy for us in 5 years from now? Where is this motivation coming from? You have to be honest to yourself. From that honesty, you make a call, and then you speak from that honesty outwards. So in your example, for example, hey, I have to make the call and say something that I want to praise you, but at the same time, something's been burdening my heart. And I want to just speak this out to you and let you know and hear what you have to say about this. And then you have a conversation about what is it that you feel and get a perspective on that from the other side. The moment you bring this out, that's when this very inner voice of something needs to change, it starts to take on a new shape, a new healthier shape. The only part that you need to do is to bring it out. That's the hard part, isn't it? Because we doubt ourselves. We say, no, maybe it's my own personal distortions, but you will be surprised, actually, if you do bring it out in a loving space without blaming. Just bring it out and see where the conversation takes you. Rather than bringing it out with a sense of blame. I've been feeling this, I've been holding this down, and I've just been giving you positive affirmations, and you give me none. I deserve some positive affirmations. Bring it out, see where it takes you, but hold that space of, as I said last week, swadharma. I have to be in a relationship without being taken for a ride when the emotions trigger me. When the emotions trigger, I have to be strong and say, right now I'm feeling emoted. It's not the right time to say something. Let me take 10 or 30 minutes away until my intellect comes back and it's able to assess the situation and say something that is more accurate in line with what I really feel. Because it's so easy and so tempting to say something when the strong emotions are there. So easy. But you will be surprised that if you only waited 1 hour later, you would have said something totally different, something more informed. So this is another thing to consider. Is it the right time to say this? Could I wait just a little bit longer and think about what I was going to say? Just think about it. And then make a call and then say it. And then share your inner feelings, your inner indicator, and see what the other person has to say. Okay.
Yeah, I just have a, quick question. Are there times where like a relationship is just, it's a lost cause? Like no matter how you approach the person, it always results in like hard, it sort of erupts regardless of whether you do it at a, in a calm state or, like I find that with some family members. So I found the best thing to do was to kind of keep a distance, but still loving and, helpful, supportive when I need to be, but not really approaching like let's try to resolve our differences or let's try to make our relationship better. Like I just find there's just people where that's just not possible. I honestly don't know why. Maybe you can explain it. But
yeah. As I said, it's very much harder with personal relationships. Now, in reference to the Vedas, they have 4 things as to how to have a relationship with our relatives. The first thing I said this last session is to bless them from a distance. That means thank them. Thank them for them being the opportunity for your learning, because they're actually there to help you see how you manage your own emotions in reference to something that is so close to you. First thing we can do is thank them for being our teacher. They are our teachers. That's an attitude to have. This is my teacher. So rather than saying this is my mom, my dad, this is my teacher, and they have shown me, and they're still showing me how to retain my composure without getting taken on an emotional roller coaster. The second thing is that you can ask for their blessings from a distance. In other words, may their soul bless me, may their knowledge, may their wisdom, may what they know bless me. You can also ask this, a little prayer. May this person, may my dad, may my mom, and all of their experience and their struggles teach me what I am yet to learn. This can also be done from a distance. The third thing that you can do is you can go over there, which in your case, you said it's not going to probably be fruitful because you've done that before. In that case, the last option is not do anything. In other words, the most you can do is not nurse any resentment towards these fellow members. If you cannot bless them, if you're unwilling to bless them, unwilling to ask for their blessings, unwilling to go to them and have some resolution, then the most you can do is remain neutral. Because whose mind is it going to disturb? Your own mind. So these are the 4 options that you have in reference to your ancestors. If I'm unwilling to go and talk to them and I'm going to keep my distance, fine. This is, no one's going to tell you to do any otherwise. This is, you already figured it out, what the dynamic is. If you're not willing to bless them, and thank them for being a lesson in your life, that's okay. If you're not willing to ask for their blessings, that's also okay. But if you're not willing to do all three of them, then ask yourself, am I now holding and nursing resentment towards them? If you are, then you need to manage that. So that's why I say the least you can do, or the most you can do, is to at least remain neutral. That's why we offer you the three other options, because most people cannot remain neutral. They're nursing some kind of resentment deep down. So we say, okay, at least convert all of that negative self-talk and whatever talk you have towards those who are close to you, convert that into a form of gratitude. You are my teacher. You're a tough teacher, but you're a teacher nevertheless. And may I learn what is to be learned. May I find a lesson and develop the strength, resilience in myself so that I can receive you objectively without being emotionally triggered by your presence. That's the least you can do.
For sure. Thank you so much.
Now, the next verse, 38 to 39, we have 4 minutes. Arjuna will show his exalted thinking. So we will see the exalted thinking of a warrior. And let's chant verse 38 and 39. Yad yap yete na pashyanti lobho pahata chetasaha kulakshaya kritam dosham mitra drohe chapatakam katham najneyam asmabhihi papa dasma nivartitum kulakshaya kritam dosham prapashyad bhirjanardana. So verse 38 and 39 wants to communicate that a lot of us make decisions based on what everyone else is doing. So in the case of gossip, suppose people are gossiping at your work, and then there's a tendency to sort of join in. Okay, so since everyone else is gossiping, I'm just going to belong and gossip also, because I want to be part of something bigger. It's much better than being isolated here and eating the food by myself. I'm just going to go over there to the gossiping group and eat with them and gossip along with them. There's a tendency to do this. So in other words, you know, summer hits or autumn hits, and everyone's wearing the new trend of saris or dresses, and suddenly you go, I have to wear the exact same thing just to fit in. Or some, you know, you go to Tirumavalai, Arunachala, everyone's wearing spiritual clothes and beads across the board. Everyone's wearing spiritual clothes. And you go, okay, I'm going to wear spiritual clothes also, just to fit in. In other words, there's a tendency to go with the literally the herb mentality. Everyone's smoking the same herb and everyone's in the same herd. So it's a herd mentality. And it's very easy to fall for this, such as in the case of Duryodhana. Duryodhana had a mentality of, I'm just going to, you know, I'm going to exercise my power to have this kingdom for myself. And, you know, he's driven by greed and the need for power, the lust of power. This is Duryodhana, the lust of power. And Arjuna, any moment, could have said, you know, Duryodhana has this attitude of not caring for us and being negligent and having lust for power. I'm going to do exactly what he does. I'm just going to not care, and I'm just going to decimate all of them, and I'm going to be exactly like him. Arjuna, being a warrior, being a hero, did not fall for this. He said, you know, there may be a herd mentality out there. They're all smoking the same herb. They're all on the same drug. They're all on the same lust for greed, lust for power, lust for being seen, lust for gossip, lust for, you know, being cool, lust for being, you know, the star of the show, lust for being the spotlight. Arjuna says, no, I have my own desire. I have my own sense of value, what I stand for. And I'm not going to compromise my deep core values in the name of fitting somewhere and being like everyone else. I was born as an individual, strong individual with my own sense of fire, my own individuality, my own purpose. And I'm going to protect that no matter what. I'm not going to let anyone override that in the name of belonging to some mentality. I am who I am, you are who you are. And I'm going to be who I am, what I stand for, and I'm going to listen to that voice that is always guiding me towards the next right step. guiding me towards the next right step, little by little, shaving off the mentality of the herd, coming closer towards your own individuality, and you find yourself finding the greatest boon in the world, which is the teaching and the teacher. That takes one of the biggest boons to receive. To have a human body, to receive the teaching that can free you from your sense of limitation, and to have a teacher that can articulate the teaching to you in a way that is able to be graspable and able to be transformable directly for you. That takes a lot of this sense of rejecting where the herd is taking me and coming back to your center, what you need to do, what you stand for, what you believe in, and nothing can take you off that. And still being able to negotiate so you don't end up like a rebellion, because rebellion is a different story. Rebellion is passive aggressiveness, basically. Passive aggressiveness. I'm not going to be like anyone because I want to be different just so I can stand out. Because I don't like the rest, I'm going to be different. We're not talking about being rebellion or rebellious. We're talking about knowing what is that inner voice specifically given to you. God talking to you every single second. I just have to tune in and listen. And when I listen, you will watch how quickly your life just accelerates, having quantum shifts forward. I certainly know how my own, if there's one thing that my life has followed, is this exact verse, what is being talked about here. No matter what, I'm going to do it my way. For example, early on in my business career, we had large forums online, and everyone's posting how to make money online, $100 here, I was like, this is nothing. I have not read one single business book in my life. Trust me, I've not read one business book, nothing. I've listened to my inner voice and became highly successful in the business world because I listened to that inner voice. And that same inner voice then told me, stop, enough is enough. You have made enough success in the business world. Now put that aside, move on and find a teacher. Got it. Go. Found a teacher. And then again, stop. You've heard enough. Now go and find someone even more closer to your own values. And I found my final teacher, Nima. All along like that, never stopping in the name of being like everyone else, being the famous businessman or something. Just moving forward, listening to that voice that's going to save you a lot and going to help you big time. Deepali?
Andre, that's a really good point. I had a question since you said you do that. How do you know it's your inner voice for your highest self that's coming, or it's just your ego? I guess that's where something I've had a lot of struggle.
I understand. The question is, how do you know that inner voice, that intuition is your own kind of idea, what is the right thing to do, or conditioning from the past, or whether it is really just that pure, uncontaminated voice of what is to be done next so that you can enjoy your life and have a quantum shift. You don't know until you actually put it out into the field and receive the results. You don't know until that. You need feedback from the world. And that feedback will let you know how much keeping with what is to be done your action is. And there's no specific formula. You have to just be very sensitive and have risk, a little bit of risk. Without risk, you will never know. That's why there's a place for risk, but not so much risk that it kind of compromises your well-being.
For me, I believe in signs because I'm spiritual, and every time I've asked like God, hey, this is something, like send me a sign if this is the right path, I always do. But other people don't believe in that. They're like, oh, that's BS. Like, how can this happen? It doesn't happen for us. I'm like, I don't know. It just works for me.
Yeah, this is exactly what I mean. And I also had the same thing. This works for me. I know it doesn't work for you. So you realize it's a very private, personal journey. Spiritual journey is very private and personal. The more you start to announce all of these your guidance systems that you enjoy, you will be kind of sometimes questioned and made to be doubt yourself because others are not where you are, and they will pose some doubt on you, and then you may regress backwards. It's a very private and personal journey, end of the day.
Yeah, I keep it to myself now.
Yeah. Just like with my business career, I was not out there on the forums asking how to do this. I just said, Just observe. What are others doing? What is working? Just observe. What is actually working? Okay, let's do what is working. It's simple. Observe, assess, do it, see the results, not working, change, again, try something else. Observe.
Perfect. Thank you.
The world is your perfect indicator of what is working and what is not working. That's why we have sometimes biography books. You read autobiographies of people and you get inspired by their works and you see what they've done and you go, wow, so if that worked for them, let me try that onto myself. It's very simple. You can either read 10,000 business books and not get anywhere, or just look at what successful people are doing. How are they talking? How are they moving? How are they thinking? How are they taking a challenge? How are they solving a challenge? And I just follow the exact same thing. Is it working for me? Yeah, this is working for me. That is not working for me. Like that, I see what is working, what is not working. And then you come to a point of total mastery where you are, anything you do, anything you decide is keeping with the order, is keeping with harmony. And it helps you move forward in a very fast fashion, but it takes risk.
So can you explain me what is the risk? I mean, like, what is,
okay,
like
sure.
on what context are you talking about?
So risk means that you know that, see, for example, you want to have a speech. Suppose you're invited to give a speech. I know we're over time. Suppose you're invited to give a speech. There is a risk, right? You could have people walking out. You could have people disagreeing with you. You could have being rejected, which doesn't feel good at all. All of these things are there. But if you let this take over you, these scenarios that the mind loves to create, scenarios of failure, then are you ever going to sit down and believe that you can do it, believe that you have the capacity to figure it out? Will you ever do that? Most likely not. Most likely not. So even if there is a risk of potential rejection, risk of potentially losing, I have to assess how much can I afford to lose? Can I afford to lose a little bit of my own pride? Definitely, because it's still worth it. I will learn how to be a stronger person. If someone insults me, I may feel terrible, but then I'll go home and I will say, what could have I done better? How differently could have I thought so that I retain my composure without being disturbed so much? So thank you, the one who has rejected me. You have taught me how to look at myself differently. But why did they reject me? Because I took the risk to have a conversation, to give a talk in the first place. That's what the risk is. So it's not irresponsibility. It's knowing how much can I afford to lose, but at the same time, why do I want to lose or willing to lose to learn? Without risk, you just can't learn. This is a fact of life. Therefore, risk becomes the ability to put yourself out into the world, to say something, to contribute. This is your chance for learning, chance for growth. And yes, people may kind of disagree with you, but every single time it happens, you will grow a stronger human being, more resilient and unmovable. In fact, the whole Gita is about the wise person, and the wise person is one who doesn't get moved. Samatvam. My mind is equanimous. Even when I'm praised, even when I'm insulted, even when joys come, even when insults come, even when there's sorrow, my mind remains equanimous. How to gain that equanimity? That takes time, that takes maturity, that takes the next week to continue these verses, which we will go through. Purnamada, Purnamidam, Purnat, Purnamudachyate, Purnasya, Purnamadaya, Purnam eva avashishyate. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shantihi.